Moving on to our next presentation, I'd like to introduce the human connection to a smart building. Matthew Marson, who is the global head of technology at Arcadis, as well as heading up the Arcadis Buildings Design practice. He focuses on designing and delivering digital real estate transformation and human-centric Internet of Things technologies within the built environment. Matthew, please join us on stage.
Hello. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to my rant. Today, I'm going to talk about kind of what I think we've experienced from technology, particularly through the pandemic. And it seems that the only thing the pandemic worked out for was the QR code. And we've ended up in a situation where we've got a bunch of rubbish experiences where I thought technology was supposed to help, but now all I do is other people's admin, even when I go to places like a restaurant. So I'm going to talk about the human connection that we should probably have to a smart building and what you can do about it. So talk through a couple of case studies, and we'll finish with some ideas that I've come up with to make our experience in a smart building even better. I'm Matthew Marson. I'm the Global Head of Technology at Arcadis and the co-founder of Smart Building Bootcamp. And through my career, been super lucky to work on all sorts of cool projects like the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, 22 Bishopsgate in London, and Oxygen at Neom. So to start with, let's think about the reason why somebody, particularly financially, might be interested in investing in a bunch of technologies for a smart building. The JLL principle, I love it, it's super clear. It says that per square foot per day, a business will typically spend about $3 on their energy, $30 on the real estate, and about $300 for the person. So yes, there's a license to operate down in the $3 section, particularly with net zero goals, but a lot of the value comes when you're doing something useful for people that work in a place or are enjoying your restaurant, your stadia, whatever it is. And the case study that I'd like to focus on, you might have heard this one from me before, but I'm really proud of the work that we did. It's my baby. It's a building called The Dock in Dublin. And the premise that we set out with here had a huge potential for experience. And we'd set out with the goals that we wanted to attract clients so that they felt inspired and confident in our office to the sorts of things that we could make for them. We wanted to attract some of the very best people on the planet to play with experimental technologies so that it was fun, that they had purpose. We wanted to build a brand so that they thought of us when it was about things that were new or the experimental side of technology, and really take innovation from the kind of nonsense place of talking to where things were actually built and we could get on with it. And to kind of do that, we'd set out to design an experience that was kind of split into two. Firstly, around how a client might get a sense of what we were doing. They would come in, they would feel inspired. We wanted to make innovation or some of the technicalities of technology to feel easy. We wanted them to understand, although something might be really technical, that in fact, they could have a working knowledge of how it was put together. And then in terms of the idea and outputs that we were looking for, it was about getting people to collide. Our hypothesis was that innovation exists in the cracks between people's interests. So if there was a way that we could nudge them together, then hopefully we would find that spark. And use technology really as a way to drive team culture. When you've got people coming from all over, as we are today, it's difficult to start those conversations. So if technology can help us to do that, then why not? And so we had set out to foster what we were calling our smart culture, using a series of digital touch points, which I'll show you how we got there a bit later, where these were the sorts of feelings that we wanted people to come away with. And normally when we talk about smart buildings, we don't have the conversation about how people should feel when they're using your digital service. It's normally, oh, is it an open data standard? Is there some backnet? Great, then it's good. And we forget the nuances of dealing with like a human. And the way that we started to map this out was something called a user journey blueprint. And if we just zoom into the top box there, we were effectively designing how a person might interact in their day when they came to this space. So if it was around the excitement that we wanted to build as part of them coming to the dock through the invitation or the pre-experience that we did, we asked them questions like, what color do you daydream in? Pretend you're 6 and still cool. What did you want to be when you grow up? A whale whisperer, jungle bridge repairer, librarian. And that are the sorts of things where we can generate a conversation around. Or maybe it's about looking a little bit later on. It's a building I've never been to before. How do I find my way around? Yes, I know it's in Hall 5, but is the conference really at the end of these boxes? This is where technology can help. And once we had kind of mocked up the different steps of the process that we expected somebody to go through, we then made little thumbnails as to how we thought somebody might see it, touch it, experience it. And from there, we were able to start to get a bit techie and have a look at the different channels in which we might be able to deliver that kind of experience. So if it's through mobile, website, a reception screen, kiosks, maybe it's your birthday, you get in the lift, the building sings you happy birthday. Daft, but all part of the magic of being in a place. There's a reason that the technology that they use at Disneyland helps to build the sense of excitement when you're there. And then for our techies, this is where we started to look at the back-end services that are then needed to deliver on those experiences, regardless of the channel. If it's around a static database that might contain some information on events, if we can pull that into an IoT platform of some sort, there was a way that we could take data from across the whole organization and some of the base build systems in order to make this experience a reality. One important exercise that we went through was to design the personality of the building. If I'm talking to a service or to my building, if it's Alexa or others, I want to be able to control the tone of voice in which it might come back to me with. So we did a bunch of workshops, and these are the genuine photos from the workshop, where we wanted to design the persona of the building. Is it a knight in shining armor that comes to rescue you? Is it a fairy godmother that will grant you a wish for the support that you might need from one of your colleagues? Is it a librarian that will go around and shush you and tell you to behave? We ended on it being a DJ, and we thought this was exactly the type of vibe that we wanted to give across the dock. The whole purpose of a DJ is to enable others to have fun. Although they're playing loud music, they're quite a silent, observing role that sees what's going on in the room. They're there to energize, ever-present, upbeat, dynamic, and responsive. And that had set the tone for how we wanted our mobile app, how we wanted the screens, other websites and tools that we had around the building to interact with the people that came there. And then we started to build out the storyboard to get in deeper, to taking it from that service blueprint that you saw earlier, which was quite a theoretical example. We started to build some models of the spaces and work out what were going to be the interactions that most people would have whilst they were in this space, and therefore have a think about how technology might make that easier. I think often when we go to people's buildings, that reception experience leaves a lot to be desired, and that was one of the things that this storyboard was looking at. So we then took possession of the building, and we went to a sort of shell of a building, really, that was stripped back. And we started to investigate where we could put certain bits of technology, where the sensors might go, how we were going to bring the theoretical experience and all of the sort of front-end screens that we had designed to life in the physical realm. We started to get creative then with some sketches where we might want to put different screens, kind of the mega wall that we were going in, how the different sensors and those kiosks were going to pick us up. It was both a technical and creative exercise. And then that's where we kind of placed the objects. We could start to then look at the actual devices that were needed, and again, try to spot them, plot them, and work out the specifications to bring it to life. This was a really cool bit of design that I think we did. So on each of the lift lobbies, we had these kind of 6-foot-tall interactive screens that were both touchscreen, and we'd also embedded in them one of the Microsoft Kinects that you used to get for the Xbox, because it's really good at picking up like the skeletons and the shapes of people, so that we could put the screens in 3 different modes. When you were far away, it was in a mode that we called Attractor, which was basically about sort of screensavers, things that people might be interested in. If you were at a middle distance, then things would resize to a point that you could then start to gesture control through the screens. And if you got really close, the content would move up to you so that you could go through the different menus and other interfaces there. And it basically meant that we had a way to tell how people were interacting with this technology rather than, oh, you've got a mobile app, that's enough, right? It also then allowed us to play around with ways that we could do some gestural control with the building so that it knows if we need help, if we wanted what we were calling a story mixer, if we wanted to see where certain members of the team were. It gave us a new way to integrate, and on reflection, it's actually really COVID safe. And yeah, this was the result. Lots of screens everywhere, sensors throughout the building. I think we had 2 for every 1 square meter on average, given all the things, and this was quite an experimental place. It was, I think, the smart building technology that we put in almost gave license to people normalizing walking around like with a HoloLens on and interrogating, say, digital twin models or other bits and pieces that they were working on for clients. Or ways in which you could then start to use smart buildings technology and services to have a bit of fun. This one was one of my favorites. We called it the Wheel of Stuff. You would apply a filter on the right-hand side if that is coffee, fitness, drinks, culture. Spin it like the Wheel of Fortune. It connects to the Google Maps API, and it will pick something for you and your team to go and do. We even built a screen. We were in a war with Airbnb next door as to whose staff could get to the Dublin city bikes first, so we connected to the API to give them a fighting chance to know how many were left for their journey home. It was also really good in helping us deal with flexible spaces, not knowing what people are going to work on, and now in a post-pandemic context, not knowing who's going to be in for particular bits of collaboration meant that we could move screens around to the right places, use the occupancy tools to know or to be able to find a space on the fly and how long it's available for. It was a really fundamental set of technologies that allowed for such flexibility. We were also playing with some of the other, so here she's doing a wireframe, of course, it's a conference presentation, and how you might be able to share some of those tools rather than the kind of awkward taking a photo of it. Nobody can really see it. It lives on a OneDrive somewhere, and we don't really deal with it. The idea is that this remains editable, and you can pull it back up and take it with you where you want to go. In fact, the whole purpose of the sort of design that we did with the physical, that the technology enabled, we called it constantly temporary, which basically meant that everything was on wheels. These guys got the photo because they were nice and neat and tidy about it. Essentially, when a project came in, the team would get a space allocated to them. They would pick their furniture. They could lay it out however they liked, whatever worked best for them. And power, and if you needed a hard data connection, was pulled down from the ceiling to keep that total flexibility below the ceiling plane. But where some of these things can start to go awry is when people don't think about the person that has to use a bunch of systems. So one that I'm seeing quite a lot at the minute in multi-tenanted buildings is that a tenant will move into their floors of a large building and say, you know what we need? A smart building app. And as part of building that app, they want to be able to find colleagues, look at tube times, book meeting rooms, all the kind of usual use cases that I'm sure we'll talk about today. And then their security person will come along and say, well, you can't use this for access control. When you're in our office, you have to wear a badge. And we've lost one of the use cases immediately. And you think, okay, fine, I've lived with the badge for years. It doesn't make sense to me that I have to take a picture round of my face when I have my face with me, but sure, if that makes you feel comfortable. Then it gets even more complicated, because the landlord will come along and say, oh, we should have a smart building app. And this will allow our tenants to enjoy how good our building is. I'm not sure what use cases they think it will do. Maybe you can order some coffee if you go down to reception. But then the base build kind of landlord access system will come in, and it won't interface with the tenant system. So then you normally end up with a second access badge to get you into the building in the first place. So now I'm at a place where I've got 2 different mobile apps, 2 different badges, and all I want to do is go sit down at my desk. Oh, and then just to make it worse, if you have a visitor come, there's probably some sort of email process from the tenant down to the landlord and a weird kind of sign-in thing. And in all of the best intentions to do the right thing by people through technology, we ended up making it worse. So my sort of challenge is don't default to an app. I think they had a really good time and place, probably pre-pandemic. We're now really good at using them in QR codes, and we've been forced into doing everybody else's admin for them. But the reason that I don't think that they're the future, and I'll talk about why, is I think they're a bit old-fashioned. I'm not sure why I would want to give space on my phone to the landlord of the company that I work for. I think there are already loads of better services out there that you could use. Why do I want my landlord to kind of build me a Deliveroo service when they could probably just tie into Deliveroo? Deliveroo's got a lot more cash than my landlord to build those sorts of digital experiences. It feels like an extra thing to just do, like know who I am and like anticipate my needs. I don't think that's too difficult. And as somebody that trained as an architect, I hate the idea that people are looking down at their phones rather than looking up at the space that somebody has designed. And I think most importantly, if you do have to do one just because it makes sense, think playful, not about dashboards. If it's the sort of thing that needs a dashboard, it feels like a back of office function and is not really meaningful when it comes to a mobile experience. This is a kind of concept that I've been enjoying recently. It's called the atomization of services, and it's the idea that you can break down the functionality in mobile apps to core back-end systems. So if I think a really good example is probably Citymapper. They have taken a whole bunch of different apps. If it's, say, the TfL in London, it's looking up the cost or the amount of time it's going to take on your Uber ride. Where is the nearest Lime electric scooter I could get on? They have successfully taken the back-end services of different apps and smush them into one thing that gives me the answer, how do I get from A to B, without having to worry about all the sort of nonsense in between. And I think it's the sort of thing we should aspire to when we're designing experiences in our buildings. I was also working on a project in Saudi Arabia that they wanted to find really subtle ways, because it was sort of premium high-end, in order to authenticate people. And facial recognition wasn't going to work for cultural reasons. So we were looking at how different wearables, perhaps if they emit Bluetooth or other signals of the sort, such that the building could almost smell you coming and open the doors. We were also looking at one where perhaps you could look at gait analysis. Effectively, the way in which people walk is apparently uniquely identifiable, and so a building could almost see who you are from the way that you've walked in and give you access or suggested other services to you accordingly. I love this one. This is in a KFC in China. Alibaba Smile to Pay. I don't need a card. I don't need to remember a PIN. It knows my face, so when I smile, I've authenticated the payment. I think this is the sort of stuff that if our buildings can start to see us, that is actually really exciting and makes a place enjoyable again. Here's a quick map I put together where I think it sort of maps the level of interaction that's required from a user versus how bespoke you can make that, and yet thought control is on there. There have been some early tests so far to help with things around temperature that are really exciting that I've seen, and is, I think, a great way to think about some of the more emerging technologies that can deliver an experience. Design thinking, worth a Google, that we don't really do in the built environment because I think we think it's too fluffy, but would highly recommend opening your mind to this as a process, the different things that are out there and what I can learn from it in order to move forward. Maybe even some wireframes that help you mock it up and get into the experience before you paid for it. And so, yeah, to finish, I wanted to go through my kind of 5 rules for delivering what are cool human experiences for smart buildings. I think the first one is to make it fun. If it doesn't make people laugh, it's not meaningful to them, it's another bit of useless functionality that will be like, oh, that's great, and then it never gets used again. My second one would be to always ask, just like Lauren, why am I bothered? There's got to be a reason for somebody to care and want to go back and use that service again that's perhaps a little bit deeper than just functionality. My third one is to think about what you can reuse. There's all sorts of stuff on GitHub that's brilliant, or services that other companies that might want to partner with you have made that will give you super experiences with very little effort when you come to build it. And that it's so important to start to think about the design of the physical and digital together. If you want something that works well and a really meaningful experience, you can't just say, oh, it's now digital, it's smart because I bought an app. And finally, recognize your limitations. I think we're going to need some friends from all sorts of different industries, from companies that we've probably never worked with before, in order to pull this together. So if any of this resonated with you and you want to kind of get deeper into some of the lessons that I've expressed today, me and the team have put together something called Smart Building Bootcamp, which has got a bunch of videos that you can watch, which should give you some of the how-to for the pictures that I've shown there. Otherwise, thank you for listening to my rant.